What's up, Unicorn Nation? Max Finn here with another episode of the Unicorn Perspective. Today, sat down with a good friend of mine, Nate Lynn, and we talked about something that's really important right now, which is what to do with your business that's booming. Because the reality is that, hey, it's a tough time. There's a lot of businesses struggling, brick and mortar mainly, but e-com, if you're in the e-com space, businesses are going like this, right? We're seeing across the board, pretty much every industry inside e-com is seeing record numbers right now. And so what do you do if you've been around for a few years and your business keeps going like this, and now it's going like this, and you want to take some money off the table? Maybe you want to sell your business. Now is a great time to be selling businesses. And now is also a great time if you're an investor or somebody that is thinking about getting into e-com. You're seeing all this happening over here. Now's a great time to buy an e-com business, right? So Nate and I had this amazing discussion about buying and selling businesses, how to do it, when you should do it, what to look for on the buy and sell side. We talked about the SBA programs happening right now, which allow you to borrow up to $5 million personally to acquire businesses. Some amazing strategies for leveraging that capital to acquire multiple e-com stores that are generating cash flow, generating profit for you. How to value your business. So many amazing bits of information, wisdom in this interview. So if you're an e-com entrepreneur or you're thinking about getting into e-com as an investor, this is an interview you do not want to miss. Stay tuned. You're going to love it. All right, Mr. Nate Lynn, what's going on, brother? How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on. Excited to be back. I think I was on an earlier incarnation of one of your interviews, but thanks.
This is the new and improved version. So it's the 2.0. And I told Nate I had to wear my Infinity Gauntlet shirt. And Nate by far has my favorite. He's my favorite person to talk to when we do stuff because his background is awesome and impressive and on brand with what we're doing. So it's always great to see what he's got back there while we're talking.
Yeah, I've got a wall of X-Men. I've got some Wolverine back here. And then on this side, one of my personal favorites is the Hulk. So I sit this way all the time. I'm in my living room, and I've got the Hulk over here, and I've got a She-Hulk, which she looks splendid. She's green. She's a little crazy looking, but still, she's got a banging body. So
next
that's
interview,
what I focus on.
Yeah, the third one will have the She-Hulk background. It'll just keep rotating as we discuss.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've got a Hulk coffee cup I use that every time I drink, I think, Nate Smash. So inspiration.
Yeah, Larissa and I are building a house right now. So it's the balancing act of how much superhero stuff do we include in the new house. But I think we'll cut the line is at the She-Hulk life-size stuff. So that's for you.
Some of them are revealing. I've got one that I keep seeing in my video that it keeps distracting me. It's like, it's totally just, chilling out in a bikini. And so when I watch my videos, I'm like, oh man, I keep getting distracted.
Well, it's like they had to tone down Scarlet Witch's costume for the movies, because in the comics and stuff, it was like, I think Elizabeth Olsen's like, I'm not wearing that. There's no way I'm wearing that costume.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many like female hero costumes that are basically a thong and and like a bikini top.
Yeah, saving the world.
Not
it was a different time when all these characters were made. So it was just a bunch of dudes in like the 30s and 50s just putting together stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I know I didn't get you here to talk about comics and superhero stuff as much as that we'd love to talk about that. Probably a more important topic to talk about is what's going on right now with business owners, right? So you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner. It's like I was talking with Vinny Fisher the other day, and we were talking. He was saying, it was just like a line in the sand. Like certain businesses you're off, certain businesses you're on, right? It's like if you happen to be an online business right now, things are really good. If you happen to be a brick and mortar business that's not doing groceries, like you're on pause indefinitely. And so I guess the first thing I wanted to like kind of get from you, because you work with so many business owners, is just like a pulse. Like what are you seeing right now with all these business owners, entrepreneurs, marketers that you work with and have in your groups and mentor and all this good stuff?
Yeah. So just to give people a little bit of perspective, I run a mastermind with 50 to 80 e-commerce entrepreneurs. I've also a broker at Website Closers, and I think we've got like 30, 40 companies listed for sale right now. And so we get a really good, pulse of e-commerce, SaaS, tech, kind of anything that's related to online, sales and online entrepreneurship. We've got a pretty good pulse on. And what we're seeing right now is for things that are related to travel. Ugh, terrible time. We had some listings that were related to travel. It's we had to delist them, quite frankly. Like they basically had to pause their business. And some of the conversations that happens is if the business is paused for too much longer, it's basically like they're gonna have to restart. So for that niche in particular, it's a devastating time. For e-commerce entrepreneurs, people who are selling direct to consumers, and they're selling anything that's close to household essential, health and beauty, vanity related stuff, which all of that's recession proof. If it's anything close to that, entertainment at home, electronics, gadgets, widgets, tools, like that sort of stuff, all of those are doing awesome, like record breaking sales. I've got, one member of the mastermind selling children's books. And he sold more in April 2020 than he did the entire year of 2019, just to give you a scale. And he's a big seller. So just the scale of how much people are selling in April and March, March, April, and May of 2020 is significant. Folks that are involved with kids and pets, they're seeing outstanding sales. So it's a bit of a silver lining in this dark cloud, because it's frustrating to see what's happening to restaurants and retail, brick and mortar retail. But on the flip side, for folks that are selling direct to consumer, especially on their own website, there was a pretty big snafu with Amazon sellers. If they weren't selling those, like, specific necessities, they were basically being put to the back of the line for Amazon Prime, and those orders weren't being delivered for a period of time. But the orders were still being, the credit cards were still going through, the transactions were still happening, and just the deliveries were delayed. So that's what we've been seeing.
Yeah, it's amazing. It is crazy though to see the juxtaposition. I think like numbers came out this morning for retail sales last month. They were down, I think 16.4% or 16.5%, which is just it's insane to see that difference of these online businesses that are just record numbers, and then basically zero over here. So what I'm curious about is, like, you obviously, if you're buying a business, you're not buying a business based off of their Black Friday numbers, right? Like you might factor that in. Hey, this is what they do during that quarter, Q4. It's, they generate half their profits for the year. So we factor that into how we're, valuing the business. How are these businesses like valuing themselves? How are buyers looking at businesses? Because obviously what's happening right now, there's a few things happening. One, this is a anomaly in history, right? Like, so the spike in the sales in these businesses is not going to happen forever. I think there's a massive adoption of e-com, so we're going to see more e-com going forward. But like these doubling, tripling, quadrupling of sale numbers like are not going to sustain. That's one thing. And then two, it's right now we're in this weird bubble where you have you might have 30 million unemployed, but a lot of the individuals unemployed, other than people that are professional services like lawyers and stuff, are getting about 1x, some up to high as 2x their salary because of the unemployment boost. So people that make less than like $20 an hour, I think, in most states are making between like 100 to 200% of their base without working. So you have 6 months of that, we're 3 months in, of a lot of people unemployed, but they still have income coming in. They're actually making more money. And so they're might be buying more stuff. When that gets cut off, it'll be interesting to see how that impacts everything. So I'm curious, like how are people on both sides of the aisle looking at valuations, factoring all that in?
Yeah, it's an imperfect science. So what's going on, and there's another layer to consider too. So on the buying side, there's the buyer themselves, and then also whoever is financing. And because often, especially for larger deals, like once you're starting to get into $1 million, $2 million, $10 million, $20 million, there's a financing counterpart. part. The SBA is a big component for things that are under $5 million, because the SBA will fund 90% of an acquisition from a business, let you make payments over 10 years at 6% interest. It's like getting a mortgage on a business. So you only put 10% down. The SBA funds the rest of it, and you pay it based on the cash flow of the business over time. So on that side, the buyers, they know this is an anomaly. It's not going to last forever. They can't take this as a trend. 2 months does not a trend make. My CFO used to like to remind me of that. It takes time. It's not just going to happen, just 1 month or 2 months. That's not a trend. So the buyers understand that, and then also the financiers, the lenders, they understand that too. So they're not going to all of a sudden crazy inflate the valuation of the company because of 2 months. Usually, what happens in a business valuation is you take a component of the previous year's sales and then a snapshot of where we are right now, going backwards for 12 months. So we'll typically take, since it's May now, we'll typically take last year up until the end of April, take the profit and the gross, and use that in the calculation for figuring out the valuation to go to list now. And it's going to be higher than it would have been 2 months ago because of the growth that's gone on. And then on the seller side, some of the sellers are seeing such a great amount of sales. They're actually thinking about, wait a second, why am I selling? Right? Like, oh, I'm making a bunch of money right now. Maybe I don't want to sell. And that can actually be quite disastrous, because all sorts of fun stuff happens after explosive growth. Shipping issues, manufacturing issues, credit card processing issues, and that typically comes as a delay. So what can happen is an entrepreneur could take their eye off the ball and then pull back a little bit on some of the infrastructure and operational things that they need to be taken care of. And when one of those balls drop, then, man, it's just such a nightmare. Oftentimes that can result in all sorts of disasters. But I think it's a great time for listings. We've never had more active buyers, and now there's all these investors and people who have holdings in restaurants, real estate, and retail that are thinking, oh my God, like, I never thought this could happen to us. And what industries and what segments are doing well? E-commerce.
Yeah, I think that's going to be really fascinating to me. Like, the next few years, what's going to be really interesting, in my opinion, I'm sure you're seeing the same thing, is like a transfer of capital, and how like capital's allocated by the big money people, right? Not just small investors, but the private equity funds, like the big investment banks that are doing massive deals, and they're doing a lot of stuff in mortgage-backed securities in different markets. But you look at, like, it's happened multiple times now through multiple cycles, where these assets that were supposed to be the stable, kind of risk tolerant assets consistently are not. Like, real estate right now, we're seeing with commercial real estate again. Oh wait, we in 2008 they were fudging the numbers. They were fudging, hey, these mortgage-backed securities, this is a great property, this is the profits. And a report came out from the Wall Street Journal today, basically saying, a whistleblower came out, they're fudging the numbers again. So there's these mortgage-backed securities that have, it's supposed to be a property that, let's say in 2018 when they got the loan, they said their profits were 100,000, and then they went back and changed it to actually, no, it was 130,000. And if you do that enough times, like, it really messes with the valuation. So you could have a huge crash again in here. So if you're like an investor, you're like, hey, I keep dumping money into, mortgage-backed securities and these things are supposed to be stable, but like I keep getting screwed because they keep messing with the numbers, and real estate's, going on a downward trend. And then over here, I see this, these college kids in their garage selling widgets, and they're doing $100,000 a day and just growing like this. That's going to be interesting to me. And I'm curious, like, if you think the same thing's going to happen, where you have these kind of more traditional investors that there's never been, all that capital over here has never really been deployed in our market, our industry. If you think there's going to be finally like a transfer of that, which would be massive for valuations, obviously.
I didn't realize how active the private equities were in e-commerce until I joined Website Closers. And it surprised me. So we've got one company that's listed at $12 million, and I'm on the phone. We had 70 private equity companies engage or sign an NDA and start the process of inquiring about that business. 70.
That's insane.
And I've been on the phone with them nonstop, and it's really interesting to hear, what risk factors they have for evaluating businesses. It's really interesting to hear, what excitement they have around it as well, because they come from a very sophisticated background, business and mergers and acquisitions, and these bigger businesses. They're scaling through acquisitions. They're not scaling through Facebook ads. Yeah. Like Facebook ads is one component, which is certainly scalable, but they're buying whole businesses because the scalability of that is so much higher than a new ad campaign or a new product launch. So I've been playing in a realm of health and beauty and direct to consumer sort of products for a long time. I sold my SaaS reporting system in 2016, but it was to a strategic buyer. It was to the company that we were extracting the information from, a shopping cart. And so I didn't really have a good feel for what the buyer's audience looked like. And it's vast. It is massive. I mean, we've got 125,000 people on our email list that are waiting for listings. And when we get a listing posted live, it's not uncommon for us to have anywhere between 50 and 150 NDAs that get filled out for active, interested buyers that want the prospectus. And I think that's. I kind of want to myth bust a little bit about what you said, because it's as if that's going to happen. It's been happening, and I think it's just going to accelerate even more. Yeah. Because it's absolutely critical right now for companies that have holdings just in commercial real estate, especially if it's like heavy retail and heavy restaurants or strip malls and that kind of, like, already the shopping malls are almost desolate in America. I mean, many of ours are a bunch of stores sitting empty and stuff. So that's taken a beating. But for those the investors behind those, they're smart people. They're going to look for something that has an upside to it. And I just think that we're going to see even more fuel put into this race car that is e-commerce.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, I think just to clarify, I don't think it's going to be, it's not like a new thing. I think you're right. Like, the acceleration is what we're going to see, like rapid acceleration. Because you obviously had the early adopters, people that were already, doing this in that world. And we've spoken to quite a few over the years that were early adopters that were building up, a portfolio of synergistic e-com brands. And we'd work with them on like the vendor side as an agency, because they can get economies of scale of like, hey, instead of each one of these companies having an agency that runs Facebook ads, we're going to retain one that's going to run across our entire portfolio of brands. So there's a lot of reasons to do that. Now we're seeing on like the media buying side of running for different supplement companies, like they're combining kind of forces. They're under one umbrella now, and what they're able to pay CPA wise, like significantly higher than if they were just in a single e-com store, because the brand now knows there's overlap between customers. We can have cross selling. There's so much stuff they can do. I guess what I'm curious about too is I feel like most people that are maybe watching this probably are not running $50 million a year businesses. They might be running an e-com store that's doing, a few $100,000, maybe a few million a year. And I'm sure one of the reservations is like, am I too little to sell? Do I have too little history to sell? And I'm curious what you're seeing right now in terms of, especially as the appetite heats up, and obviously the more buyers enter a market, the kind of looser they get restriction wise of like, hey, we're initially looking for companies that have been around for 5 years and done this and this. But if there's not that many companies, and but there's a bunch of these companies that are a year old, but they're all doing, now 5 million, like maybe those change, but maybe they don't. I'm just curious what you're seeing there.
Yeah, let me tell you a little bit about what the pool of the buyer profiles look like. So the first segment of buyers that we work with, and there's like, this changes if you go to like flippa.com or BizBuySell, like you can pick up websites for, couple $1,000,
Yeah.
that I don't really call that as businesses. Like that's, domains and websites. And there's a lot of stuff on there that isn't representative of what a real buyer is. So the profile of the basic buyer is someone that has, been making $250,000 a year. They're all, they've been involved in corporate America for 10, 15 years, and they're burnt out. They don't want to do that anymore. There's millions of those types, John Doe's, James Smiths of the world that have corporate jobs, have made really good money. They hate that work. They want to do something different. And they're interested in something that gives them the freedom and the ability to be to be remote, to be anywhere in the world, and also something that doesn't require a lot of overhead. They've got staffs and they've got teams of people, and they've been program managers and project managers for years. That's what I was as a VP of Bank of America, and I hated it. I didn't want to do that anymore. So that's like the basic profile. So what they're looking for is a business that's making at least $250,000 in profit. So because they can't go back to Jane and say, their wife, and say, I quit my job and I bought a website for $30,000 and I'm going to give this a go. I can do it, honey. She's going to say, you get your ass back to work and you get your job back. That's what she's going to say. Yeah, we got bills to pay. So they're looking at these businesses that have they would prefer 2 years track record, but we have very successfully sold businesses that only have $100,000 in profit and only a year track record. Some as small as 3 or 6 months in track record. But the just giving you the profile, the appetite of what the average buyer is looking for. They want something making about $250,000 a year, and it's 2 years old. That's what they want. It gives them some stability, gives them some good income, because they're going to take taxes out and all that kind of stuff. So, they have to replace their income in some way, and they'd rather buy a business than start it from scratch, because they don't have 2 years to do on the side what the initial entrepreneur did. They don't have the time to do that. They've got a full-time job. They need to make a clean break from one and go straight into the other. And typically they will finance the acquisition of that business with the SBA, and like I was talking about before. So they're only coming up with 10-15% money down, and the rest of it's being paid over time, like a mortgage on a house. Like that's a great way for them to get into it.
Yeah, which is really interesting.
Yeah, so that's kind of like and that goes all the way up to about $5 million in business valuation. The SBA is a great equalizer in acquisitions right now. In fact, they're making the first 6 months of payments for any new business acquisition. So you can hoard cash the first 6 months that you make that acquisition, sock that away in a rainy day fund, and then you start making the payments later on for it. So that's kind of like the entry level. Typically those businesses are being listed for $500,000 on up to $5 million. Then the next segment between $5 million and $10 million. This is actually a little bit tricky because there's not a lot of great financing in that area. You can get the SBA still up to about $5 million, but if it's an $8 million business, you still got to come up with another $3 million. So usually what happens is the seller has to give a little, and they will hold some equity, or they'll have an earn out over a period of time to make up a little bit of that difference. So they'll get paid out over a year or two. Or that the buyer's got to go find some financing from friends or family or from somewhere else to fill that gap. Then and that typically in that range, not as usual as it just a corporate type that's just looking to get into something their first time. That's typically other existing businesses. It might be other synergistic businesses, other businesses involved in the same niche, same vertical, same product type, and they want to consume those customer sales and into their system as well. Then over $10 million, that's when you get the private equities, and the private equity companies, they'll structure a deal in a way that they get financing from the capital markets and from institutional investors and from other funds. And they'll bring in, if there's not a operator that's going to stay on board, many of them would prefer to keep the original operators involved and let them hold some equity. So in that range, is very, very common for the seller to just sell a majority stake, not all of it, and then they get to retain some equity for another sale 2 to 5 years down the road. And that's kind of how those deal structures, tend to work out. Every situation is completely unique to itself, but I'm seeing a lot of trends that relate to that. So that's kind of how the buyer universe looks like. And there's millions of them out there in the smaller group, the under $5 million, and those are much easier to close. The closing rate on those is really high, like 90%, as opposed to the bigger deals. A little bit more due diligence involved, a lot more time, with it too, because the scope and size of it, and because the buyer has a back end kind of gray hair sitting in a giant building that's going to fund it, that's checking all these boxes that they want infrastructure and this and that. So that's kind of how that shapes out.
So many paths that I want to go down from there, but I guess the from a strategy perspective, that's interesting. I didn't know about the 6 months of the SBA kind of funding your 6 months payments, which makes sense because you have all the lenders for all the auto companies are doing that now. It seems like that's becoming a big trend to get people to take action, take a little risk off the table. So I'm curious. I know one of the strategies, because you did reference, hey, once you hit the 10 million mark, then all of a sudden you get the private equity markets involved, is the kind of concept of like a roll up of taking multiple, assets that are synergistic that might all be a few $1 million, rolling up into one, and then selling that for 15, 20, 30 million. So what's interesting is you have that 6 month window now. I'm curious if you see anybody or know anybody that's leveraging that to acquire a few companies and then try to sell that in a 6 to 12 month window. So it's really like you're playing with the house's money at that point. It's, hey, paying nothing out of pocket other than the down payment, obviously the 10 to 20%, whatever that might be. And then I'm able to actually sell the roll up to a buyer for 100, 200, 300% without actually having to make any substantial payments. Curious if that's something people are doing right now.
I think from a timing perspective, it's going to be slightly challenging because it does take, 3 to 6 months to close on a deal, depending on the size of it. But there's definitely that strategy is definitely in place for several. So I've got a virtual summit coming up called the Buy Sell Summit, and I interviewed this guy named Shaquille Prosla. And so the SBA gives you, as one individual guarantor, they give you up to $5 million to spend. And you can put like $1 million into 5 businesses. It could be $2.5 million into 2 businesses, or it could be $5 million into 1 business, in any derivation of that. And that's exactly what he did. He's used the $5 million to go acquire a bunch of businesses. He's only put 10, 15% down. He went and found businesses that already had pretty good cash flow from SEO because he's a paid media expert. So for him, it was like, okay, well, let me turn on the paid ads. And that's something I think that your audience would be, and you guys, be interested in, that strategy, because that's a great one. If you've got an unfair advantage, or you've got a very specific strength, then using that in your acquisition strategy to find something that's opposite in strength, acquire that, add in your special sauce, and then boom, you've got a valuation that's 100%, 300%, 500% higher than it was a year after you acquired it. And as the businesses grow, the multiple grows as well. So there's people ask about the value of their business. I'm happy to do business valuations for anybody that's interested. Just message me. It can be quite complicated, but one of the basic elements of it is the profit of the business. As the profit grows, the multiple grows, and that's why these roll-up companies are buying these smaller companies, because their multiple is, let's just say, 10x. Yep. And if they're buying businesses at 3x, well, they make 7x. They add that extra.
They're just arbitraging it
immediately. they're just arbitraging it. So that's why they're out there finding good deals and buying businesses. And so that's, that's a big component of the buyer's market as well.
Yeah, that's you. Just so everyone that's listening to, because I know sometimes, like I love this stuff. I know you love this stuff, and sometimes you can get like technical and start saying things that might lose people. So just to clarify for everyone that's like listening. So what Nate just said, which is it's such a cool concept and it's just an amazing concept of arbitrage, is basically like if you're a business that's, let's say you have $100,000 a year in profit, and I, for that, that's let's say it's a 5x multiple, right? So that means I'm going to pay $500,000 to acquire a business. Obviously, keep the math super simple here. So I'm willing to pay 5 times what you make for the future earnings. But if you're coming into a company now that has, 10 million in profit thanks to yours, I can sell that company, let's say, for 10x multiple. So I essentially, got your business for half off. I can bring it to my business. So I paid 500,000 for your business. I can actually now sell your business as a piece of mine for 1 million without doing anything else, just because you came into my business and now it's part of a bigger pie that investors are willing to pay a premium for because it's more stable and there's volatility with low profit companies, which is just like,
Yeah.
it's mind blowing, that stuff, like the arbitrage opportunities. But that's exciting stuff when you're thinking about your strategies.
And we're right in it. Like this is happening in e-commerce and ad agencies. Same thing. They're very sellable right now. We've got several that we've listed and sold recently. So people who are doing Facebook ads, and they've started to master that. If they can get their books together and make sure that it's all in one entity, and you've got some financials and stuff, and you can show some some income over time, that's a sellable business.
Yep.
And it's quite valuable. There's other ad agencies that want to add, they're doing the same thing. They want to add, that income to their balance sheet and to their profit and loss because they're bigger. And, just exactly what you said. So these are techniques that I think maybe in the past people would feel they were reserved for public companies like Apple, buying, making some big splash and making a huge acquisition, Amazon doing that. But this happens in the private market as well. Public companies get involved too. It's just like it's steps on the ladder. Like in the under $1 million worth of profit, private equities don't really touch. Once you start getting over that, 2 million, then the private equities start to get involved. So it's kind of like, the little fish gobbling up other little fish, becoming bigger fish, and then bigger fish gobbling each other up, becoming even bigger fish. And it just keeps going until you eventually get into the public markets and, middle market, which, 50 million to 500 million. And then it keeps going. Like it doesn't really stop until you get to Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook, Google, Facebook, those 5 behemoths.
Yeah. And I think Facebook, they just bought Giphy for 400 million today. I just saw that. So that's even the big players are making big acquisitions right now. You have Amazon, I heard, is starting to look at AMC. I don't know if you've heard about this one, buying AMC theaters. As a movie buff, that's a interesting one, because obviously the theaters right now are very stressed. And Amazon,
when that happened,
I think in the last few days it just started like leaking that, like, it's the discussion they've been having apparently internally, because they have obviously that huge content arm. So I want to keep talking about the business. I think there's a lot of great questions, but I'm just let's go down this path real quick because I'm curious to get your thoughts. I talked to Vinny about this the other day. Like, do you think there's a point in time where there is such thing as a too big to fail, that these acquisitions, like by these big companies acquiring other big companies, are there should be a line? I guess let me just preface by saying for me it's been weird because I've always grown up like hardcore free market person, capitalist entrepreneur, where I believe that, hey, if you outcompete and outwork somebody, there should be no cap on your rewards. But then lately what I've been seeing is like this kind of repetitive thing of like the too big to fail, right? We gotta bail the airlines out now because they're too big and they fail. There's disasters. In 2008, it was the banks. They're too big to fail. And you have, Facebook, Google control information at such a massive level that now there's this weird thing for me personally where it's like, well, do I actually believe fully in that like free market, or is there actually a point where I start to just socially, just like personally feel like there's such thing as a too big of a company, too powerful? And so you have like Amazon, like, hey, Amazon now makes movies and TV shows. If they buy the biggest theater chain in the world, they now have a direct arm to push their content, and they could push out, Universal and all the, other companies that make movies, Disney and stuff. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that. Where do you fall on that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question because let me give you some context. In 2008, I was I was an entrepreneur leading up into 2008. I was developing real estate, and my business went busto because the housing market went
Yep.
crazy. So I suck it up. I reread Rich Dad Poor Dad. I remembered the part where he talked about going back into the military and learning leadership skills, and I thought to myself, "Son of a bitch! All right, well." Through that whole time, I didn't really think I was a great manager or a great leader. So I thought to myself, all right, well, I need to get myself a job. I ended up going, putting my resume together and working with some headhunters, and I found some work, interestingly enough, back into real estate, but on the banking side. And so I was watching. I remember I was working at E-Trade Financial actually down in Ballston, Virginia. And the day that Lehman Brothers like crashed, I remember sitting in the cafeteria, kind of like watching it all unfold on TV. And the government just said, okay, well, they made an example out of them and let them, implode. And then went about, all these other institutions too big to fail, AIG, Goldman Sachs, these different ones. And it seemed to me like it was more based on connections that those businesses and those companies had with, political figures and lobbyists and that kind of stuff. And this is just totally my own opinion.
Which is fine.
I don't have any, yeah, I don't have any context to base that on. But, being in those institutions, I went from 2008 to 2012. I worked at Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Navy Federal Credit Union, E-Trade Financial, Bank of America. So I went working, and also I had part of my time at Fannie Mae was actually as the administrator, one of the personnel responsible for the administration of making home affordable, which was a U.S. Treasury and Obama, pushed program. So I get to spend, time sitting in rooms with, undersecretaries of the United States Treasury Department and that kind of stuff. And it was interesting because I think there was a general sentiment across the board from those government employees that many of the banks should have just failed. And the ones that had the strongest balance sheets, would have prevailed. And, there was a lot of contempt from Bank of America employees that they had to buy Countrywide in the way that they did because they did not get a good deal. And they took some huge, hits for a long time, when the government kind of force fed them Countrywide because Countrywide was too big to fail. And Wells Fargo took on Wachovia, but they got a way better deal, and it showed on their balance sheet and their stock and stuff, going on through that forward. So I think as I look back on it now, I just let the cards, rest where they may. Just let it sort itself out. Let free market, do its thing. Someone's going to step in. Like you've got these companies that have got massive stockpiles of cash, and yeah, maybe like everything we have is going to be Facebook, Google, Apple, Amazon, and Microsoft. But I mean, I don't know. It's like I don't really know who else could bail those companies out, and I don't think that they are going to bail them out for the nicety of it. Like this is a meritocracy. Like they need to see some return on it, but someone will see some return, and there's definitely value in interstate transportation through the air. Like that's someone's going to figure that out, and whether it's Amazon because they've already got a huge fleet and they buy up some of these other airlines, and then maybe part of the airlines are part cargo, part passenger. you know that could be a solve for it. So maybe Amazon is also transporting, cargo, as well as passengers. I think the weight restrictions might prohibit that, which is, I think, why that doesn't happen. But that's for aviators to figure out. Like there's innovation. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I say let them fail. And I mean, no one's really, no one's here to bail us out. This stimulus money is like $1,200. Like, well, what's that going to do? Even the PPP. I went and I got a PPP, but it's 2.5 months worth of your salary. Okay, well, the epidemic lasted already more than 2.5 months, and it's going to last longer. My events and mastermind business is effectively put on hold. I can't hold events, so I've lost half a year's worth of revenue because of the timing of when it came. Two events that I couldn't facilitate, and I don't have any opportunity to promote and solicit that to my audience. So I'm not getting half a year's worth of salary, or income from it. So I just say let the cards fall where they may, and see what sorts out that way.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, because you look at like Apple has record cash. They've always just had a ton of cash. Their cash pile's been insane. But then you have like the airlines where they spend almost all their cash buying back stock. So it just, hey, like Apple prepared, they saved a lot of money because they want to have their ammo when things happen. They want to buy companies. You guys bought back all your stock to make more money, and now you have no cash. So it's just like you didn't prepare, right? If bad things happen and there's unpredictable events, but that's part of your job as a business owner is to plan for the worst, right? You got to prepare. Obviously, this is just a totally like massive scale and unprecedented, but at the end of the day, you can't save everybody, and it's hard to like pick and choose and be selective with when to bail things out. Like it's I think Scott Galloway says, it's kind of capitalism on the way up and socialism, cronyism on the way down. So it's to get all the upside but none of the downside, which isn't capitalism, right? It's not a free market. But yeah, you have like Apple. I mean, it's now there's talk like Apple might try to buy Disney, Netflix. Like there's these companies that just have Apple's always wanted that, and it seems crazy to think that you could ever afford to buy Disney, but like a month ago it was like 30%, 40% off because its stock had just tanked. So it's interesting time. So like that gets me to, we'll go back to the business part of the buying business is the timing of it, right? Because I know there's probably people who are listening to this, watching this, that are like, hey, I'd love to sell my business, but there might be two very different reasons why they want to sell. It might be just, hey, like things are going really well, I'm too busy and I want to cash out. And then the other side, which is unfortunately, I feel like a side a lot of people fall into, is my business is now, it did really well for a long time and now it's tanking and I don't want to lose everything. So I want to sell. So I'm curious, like what your advice is on that side, right? People that are on the way, that are on a downward trend, never the time you want to raise money or sell a company. But unfortunately, it's a time most people try to do it because when things are good, they're never thinking about it. Like, hey, maybe I should raise a few $1,000,000 now because we're record profits, we can get a great valuation, and then just have cash in the bank ready to go. Maybe we should sell the company at a high. It's always like, no, we're going to keep doubling down, tripling down, distribute the profits, and then, hey, things are bad, we need cash. And now there's blood in the water for investors and buyers. What do you do there if you're in that position right now?
It's a tough one to be in, Max. For people who have businesses that are in like pretty severe decline, uh, that's not appealing to someone who wants to, they want to leave their corporate job and have some safety net, some security of something that has a track record of a year or two and some money. So then you're attracting, vultures, basically vulture buyers that, it might be something where they want to buy the inventory at cost or at a severe discount. The experience I've had, and I've had businesses on both. I've had businesses on humans on the upside that I didn't even know there was an M&A market the way that it is, and I didn't sell. And then I've had that in some cases that same business on a steep decline, and it's about nothing you can do. Like you kind of have to shutter the thing. Occasionally you can find, folks out there that will take it over. Roland Frazier is actually probably a pretty good person to talk to about that because he's got a group of people that are looking to buy businesses, no money down. And you could do that for a business that's kind of in free fall. You can't do that really for businesses that are, doing really well. Sellers that have good businesses aren't selling for no money down. They want cash. And the SBA, is ponying up 90% of the acquisition. They're getting it. So that you're probably going to be dealing with somebody that's going to come in and might be a strategic partner or they're basically going to take it over. And then you kind of see what you get. But the options aren't that good for folks that are in decline. I mean, my advice would be, what is it like that's causing the decline? Is it, is it marketing? Is it operations? Figure out what the missing link is, and set about trying to fix it. Try to get the business back on the uptrend, and that's timing is absolutely critical in M&A. You want to be selling on the upswing. You don't want to be selling on the downturn, because whatever price you had asked for, it keeps getting renegotiated as you're going through due diligence, and you keep getting less and less and less, until eventually the buyer's like, listen, this thing's on a free fall. I don't even want it. That tends to be it's kind of black and white for most buyers. It needs to be at least sustainable, stable or growing. At least in our buyer pool. Again, like that would be a good opportunity maybe to list it on Flippa or Biz Buy Sell, something like that, because you can find people that might be interested. But man, it's time consuming. You don't have any, part of my job as a broker is I'm vetting the buyers, making sure that, we're not wasting time, and that we're working towards a conclusion, because I only get paid when the business sells. So when the seller gets his money, I get paid a commission, just like in real estate, like real estate brokers, same deal. So that's the that's the thing you're looking for, that transaction to complete. And when you're in that situation where things are kind of going downhill, and you've got buyers that it's in their best interest to wait. This guy's going to crash even further. I'll just wait another month. Change my price again, or just see, I want all of his inventory, but I'm going to wait till this guy's really desperate. Sell it to me 10 cents on the dollar. And you have no power in that position. You're left at the whims of your buyer.
Yeah, that's a place you don't want to be, is desperate. As soon as you need money, it's really hard to get it. And if you do get it, it's from somebody that's going to just take the farm, and they'll wait you out and bleed you out, like you said, because there's no rush to buy a distressed asset until it's fully just hit the floor, and you get the best deal for it. So on like a positive side of things, what are some things that, if you're people listening right now, hey, I got an ecom biz, it's doing really well, it's growing, and I think I might be interested in selling it in the next few months, the next year or so, like what could I do today to maximize my valuation, my multiple that I can get?
Get your financials in order, because think about it, let's just pretend we're a media buyer or an e-commerce entrepreneur. The first thing your customer sees is let's just say it's your Facebook ad. That needs to look pretty. It needs to convert somebody. Well, in M&A, the first thing a buyer looks at is your profit loss, your balance sheet. And if you've got some longevity, they're gonna want to look at your taxes too. But the P&L and the balance sheet's the first things that they're gonna want to look at, and they need to look professional. They need to be accurate, and they need to be complete. They actually need to be done. And oftentimes, what I have found is an e-commerce entrepreneur is not terribly organized, and they maybe don't have bookkeeping done. They've got a Seller Central account if they're an Amazon seller, or they've got a Shopify account, and that all goes into one bank account. They need to get it all sorted out and cleaned up, because the first thing a buyer is going to look at is the P&L and the balance sheet. It's the first thing they ask me every time we send out. Like, I actually needed to list the company too. Like I can't even figure out a valuation, an accurate one. I mean, we can like pie in the sky it, but I can't figure out an accurate valuation unless we've got some kind of numbers to look at. So that's absolutely something that they need to do, and it can be done fairly cheaply. I mean, there's I interviewed Marvin Baker on the Buy Sell Summit, and he's like the wolf from Pulp Fiction when it comes to fixing financials. Like, he comes in, he says, do this, do this, do this. I'm not here to be your friend. I'm here to get you out of this situation. He's actually much friendlier than that, but he comes in and he sorts out people's financials. He gets into their shopping carts. He gets it all downloaded. For people that have nothing, he can reconcile it to their bank statements. If there's commingled business entities and business activities, he can sort through all that. That's something that's a pretty big thing too, is if you got a glimmer of thinking about selling, it's important to go ahead and talk to somebody about it, because there's just so many things that need to be done. For your audience, I'd be happy to talk to anybody that wants to, and give them some guidance. If they want to do it on their own, work on getting your financials, make sure that the entity is a U.S. based entity. Even if you're international, get a U.S. entity, have a U.S. based bank account. They're worth more money to buyers than international entities. And then you can actually sell the entity as opposed to just selling the assets, which again makes it more valuable. So that's what I would recommend, making sure that all the money goes into one bank account and all the expenses are only related to that business, come out of that one bank account. Have a bookkeeper that's keeping the books, that's updating the books every month. It's not terribly expensive. You can use bench.co. They do it for $75 or $80 a month. A couple other companies can do virtual bookkeeping for you too. But you need to have monthly P&Ls and balance sheets done. And right there puts you ahead of many e-commerce entrepreneurs trying to sell that try to get away with not doing that. It's almost like someone's like trying to like go out to the field and having to turn the field over by hand. It's like they feel that there's all this work. Let the horses do it. Let the machinery do it. But it still has to get done. You can't plant the field until you get it turned over and you get seed put into it. So it's a bit frustrating to have folks that, like, hey, just list my business. Okay, well, let's see the financials. Oh, I don't have any financials. List my business. Well, the buyers, the first thing they're going to say is, "Where's the financials?" So and then I'm putting my reputation out there, and the company's reputation that we're a bunch of dodo heads, we're a bunch of idiots, and it just doesn't go anywhere. So that's important.
In terms of like and that totally makes sense. Most important thing in terms of like a revenue sources, how does that factor in? Because I imagine there's people that are listening, watching that. Hey, I'm a single product company and I sell a product one time. But then there's probably people that I have subscription service where I have people on reoccurring, which obviously that's more enticing. Or, hey, my business, I did $1 million this month, but it cost me, $500,000 in Facebook ads. And if I turn Facebook ads off, it goes to zero. Whereas this other business might be, hey, a lot of word of mouth, a lot of SEO, a lot of organic that doesn't cost anything other than initial investment. So I'm curious, like how are those things playing out in the multiples?
Play to your strengths. If you're great at Facebook and if the sales go to zero when you turn off your Facebook ads, keep your Facebook ads going. Because here's what you may not be considering. There could be a buyer out there that doesn't know anything about Facebook and they've got Google dialed in, or maybe they've got Amazon figured out, or maybe they've got their SEO or some email, going on, and your product is similar to theirs. Your demographic crosses over and they want that skill set. So that's something that they'll pay for. So I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense for the M&A event, for the sale, to try to get wild with ideas of bringing in extra revenue. You, as an entrepreneur, it's your first job. Sales is your first job. It's really your last job too, until you're over, a couple $1 million in net. That's really like your sole effort. So however you can do that, whether it's email, Facebook, Amazon, Google, SEO, whatever it is, keep with your strengths. And then if you can find, other low hanging fruit, then exploit those. Absolutely. You should be doing that all the time anyways, whether you're selling your business or not. But I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense to say that, well, here's a myth I want to bust too. We've got companies selling in upwards of $10 million and more that are very one-dimensional in their marketing channels. They may just be only on an owned website like a Shopify or something and running Facebook, Instagram, and that sort of stuff. We've got companies that are only on Amazon and have no Shopify store, have no Facebook ads. So it is possible, and those businesses sell because they're still valuable. They've got profit and they've got gross. And they've got a track record. They've got history. So really, any business that's doing those numbers, it's the buyer is looking for what's something that I can invest money into that can, with as lowest risk possible, keep going. How can I keep this going? So in those instances, you may be better off keep doing what you're doing, but record everything. Use Loom, use Zoom or something else, and record your daily work efforts, so you can transition that to a buyer that they can actually walk away with an asset they can continue operating the same way you did.
Yeah, that's super smart to just document everything and have a clear SOP and process to make that really an easy process, so you're not anchored to the business forever. Because that's the one thing you don't want to have is like somebody's buying your company, but they also need you there, so you're stuck to that business for another few years in an earnout, unless it's a massive deal or something where you're getting a massive kicker. But I imagine a lot of people, it's like, I don't want to be an employee for a few years. I'd rather just sell, turn everything over, transition, and then move on to something else.
A lot of people are afraid of that, but the conversations that I see happening are usually whoever the acquiring partner is. They want, if the original owner is going to stick around, the buyer wants that individual to be doing what they like doing and what they're good at doing, not the crap that they hate. Like, not the bookkeeping, not the inventory sourcing, maybe not, if someone that doesn't like to travel, you're newly married and you guys have a little one now and stuff. Travel's harder, so the aspects of the business that require travel, starts to suck, when you're in that situation. You want to be home. You want to experience life with the family and stuff. So those are the things that can be negotiated and can be worked out, through an acquisition. It's just, what is it, knowing deep down, what do you want, and then being clear about that. And then when things change, just recognize, okay, well, this changed. I wanted this when I started this journey, but now that I've gotten part way into it, things have changed a little bit, and that's not really what I want. Just being communicative about that and working through it, can solve a lot of issues.
Makes a ton of sense. So, I mean, covered so much stuff, and this stuff gets me super excited. I think anybody that's watching that owns an e-commerce business right now, or like, this is an exciting topic. So if somebody's listening and watching, they're like, hey, I'm now interested in this. I think I got a great business that fits this criteria, or I'm thinking about buying a business. What's the next step? Where can they go from here? Obviously, we'll drop links and stuff, but just from you, what's the process look like?
Yeah, so the process for selling works like this. We need to talk. Like, I can't just like come up with a valuation on my own out of thin air. I need to know more about the business. We kind of figure out the sales plan, because everyone's situation is different. I do free consultations for that. It takes half an hour or so. We can talk a little bit about what where you are, what's going on. If it's a fit, then we list the business. We sign an engagement agreement. I collect more information. I create the offering memorandum. We get the financials. We get that all included. We go through a seller interview. It's basically a whole bunch of questions, like 6 pages worth of questions that we make sure to get all documented. Put that together in the offer memorandum. It's also called a prospectus. Some people call it a CIM. And then we get the company listed on the Website Closer's website. We've got 30 to 40,000 active viewers that are watching it, and it is actually the place to get the most up-to-date information. Our emails go out after, but we send out an email, 125, 130,000 some odd people. And then for me individually, I've got my own list of people that are interested in different companies and stuff that I blast that out. And then we start getting NDAs from all over the place. My inbox goes nuts when this happens, and I've got to sift through them all, make sure they all get signed. And then we start, I send out the offer memorandum to the buyers. They review it, and then we start the conversations back and forth between buyer and the seller. That can take, anywhere between a couple of days, or it can take a couple of months. It just depends on where the seller is in terms of time pressure. Some sellers like to go out a little bit more bullish on the price, and they can wait it out a little bit. Others are a little bit more motivated to sell, so they'll come in at a little lower price, and they want to get something closed and done sooner. So it's total strategy that we develop in that process on the front side. Once we get an interested buyer, they'll submit a letter of intent. We take the listing, mark it as pending, and we work through due diligence. And due diligence will take anywhere between a couple of weeks, and sometimes it could be longer. It just depends on what level of information is being asked for. We create a data room, upload all the documents, work back and forth to the buyer. The buyer, this kind of parallel track, they needed to have been working on their financing if they needed it. And I'll chat with them too when we're doing this to make sure we're not having a tire kicker, because the last thing we want is like 3 months to go by and a buyer to be like, oh, I don't have any money, but thanks for sharing all this with me. It's been fun.
Yeah.
So we vet all that out. But once the due diligence process is done, it goes to an asset purchase agreement that we sign, and then moves towards closing. The funding all happens. Seller gets their cash. The broker gets paid his commission, and the buyer, usually that's what triggers also the transition period too, or the seller. We recommend like 90 days usually for these smaller deals to spend with the buyer. 30 days, the seller running the business, the buyer watching them. 30 days the buyer and seller running the business together, and then 30 days where the buyer's running the business with the seller available for calls and consulting. And at a minimum, that tends to be a pretty good transition period, and then the transaction's done.
Amazing, man. That's exciting stuff. I know we have a few ecom businesses and stuff that I think in the next few months we may be considering something like that on the selling side, but also on the acquisition side. We're starting to look more into that space. So I know we're going to be talking more about all that good stuff. But hopefully I'd imagine that a few people watching are going to be hitting you up, because it's like this is such a great time to have a liquidity event or to make some really, really smart investments. So we'll make sure we put all the information in the, wherever this is on Facebook, YouTube, it's going to be in the copy, Spotify, all that stuff. We'll make sure that there's links, and we'll make it very easy for you guys to reach out to Nate. Well, Nate, I mean, it's always awesome getting to catch up, getting to chat. We share so much stuff, and I'm excited for the third episode we're going to do, where you're going to get She-Hulk in the background. So
that's it. Make sure to save December 10th and 11th. Bring the wifey out to Aspen. We're going to do another event up there.
Love it. It's on. I'm going to add it to the calendar now. Look forward to seeing you then, man. Finally in person. We'll get some in-person time. It's all this weird virtual stuff. So that'll be great.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining me, brother. And we'll see everyone in the next episode. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I know I have a blast with all these episodes. This is something I really have fun doing. This is a passion project for me. There's no real big agenda here, but I've been getting a lot of requests from people that listen to the show, that watch it, wherever they're watching it, for how they can learn more, how they can get into the community, the unicorn community. So I wanted to record this little outro just as a way to tell you more about how you can get deeper into our community, learn more, engage more, build deeper relationships, and all that good stuff. But first, if you enjoy these episodes, wherever you're watching, if you're watching it on Facebook, YouTube, if you're listening on Spotify or iTunes, make sure wherever you are, if you like this, give it 5 stars, give it a thumbs up, give it that like button, wherever you are, right? It's going to be different wherever you are. Write a review, and make sure you subscribe so you get the latest episode that drops every week on Thursday. Now, if you want to join our free Facebook group, it's growing like crazy. We now have over 23,000 people in that group. Just go to Facebook and search Marketing Strategies for Business Leaders. That's our free Facebook group. Amazing content in there. We're starting to really build it up and do some cool stuff there. If you want to go further, if you want to invest in yourself, if you want to be part of our kind of premium program, specifically to learn advanced cutting edge paid traffic skills, be able to ask me questions on a weekly basis, be able to have me personally review your ads, your funnels, your landing pages, all that good stuff, go to Paid Traffic Training, all one word, paidtraffictraining.com. You'll be able to learn all about that program. It's a monthly program, gives you access to both my Facebook courses, private Facebook group, and again, we do weekly calls where I do a 90-minute call with our students, and they can ask me anything. I share the latest and greatest stuff. I can review, ads and funnels and all that good stuff. I do audits, Q&As, amazing stuff, and that's just $97 a month. It's month to month, no long-term commitment. So if you want to be part of that, paidtraffictraining.com. If you don't, but you want to just be part of our group, go to Marketing Strategies for Business Leaders. That's on Facebook. Just search that. Join our free Facebook group and join the unicorn community. And remember, give it 5 stars, hit that like button, hit the subscribe